Our next presenter is a joy. You wouldn't know this, Philip, but no. You would know that. But Tuya introduced Claire as somebody who looks a little bit like an adolescent. Well, I wouldn't say this about Philip, but he does look young. But this is an old soul, as you will see very, very quickly. We came across Philip as a person at a conference that we were at on the East Coast, and he was then working part of his 14-year tenure with Search for Common Ground. He made an amazing presentation about their work, but it came through Philip in a way that was just, you felt it. He kind of lived it as he presented it. So we invited him to present here at this conference. He did the same thing. So he is able, somewhat like Heidi, by the way, but to be what he's talking about. Okay, he is a serious meditator. If you don't mind, a student of Yogananda, but also of all the teachings, and has been focused for a larger part of his life, really, on peace, inner peace, world peace. That's kind of the continuum. So those years with Search for Common Ground gave him a chance to work in Sierra Leone and other places around the world and draw many lessons from that. He's recently joined the Shift Network. Shift Network, right? Okay, good. As director of Summer of Peace, about which he will tell you much more. So this is one of the most exciting things we've seen going on, this whole Birth 2012, of which the summer is second phase, I guess we would say, right, after the spring. So Philip has written a book which is about to be published, and you may have seen the cards in the bookstore, but I want to let you know, coming out in June. This is called God and Conflict. And it's approached from the same thing we talk about here in terms of conflict being necessary and harmony eventually coming out of it if we're able to work it in the right way. A wonderful introduction or foreword by Surya Lama Das, and some words here from Andrew Harvey. You may know him. This is a brave, passionate book written from a broken heart that dared to engage in sacred activism. So, Philip, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, Sheldon. As Sheldon said, I am the Director of Peace, which is probably the funnest title I think I've ever had. And there's a lot to be done in that. So I want to ask, what comes to mind when you hear the word peace? Anybody? Lack of war. What else? Quakers. Harmony. Okay. Unity. Equilibrium. Quietness. Shambhala. Right action. All right. And right human relations. Excellent. There's a man in Australia named Steve Killalea. Has anyone heard of Steve Killalea? He's created the Global Peace Index, which is a very scientific way of measuring the most peaceful countries in the world. And right now, Iceland and New Zealand are battling it out in a nonviolent way on who's the most peaceful. And Steve in a telesummit we had with the Shift Network called Peace Week, he said something that I thought was really profound. He said, it was Socrates who said something to the effect of, you can't really fully understand something until you have the language to discuss it. And he said, we have one word for peace, and we're using it in multiple different contexts. Japanese has 14 words for beauty. I've later heard that Sanskrit has 108 words for love, and some indigenous cultures in the Arctic have over 100 languages for snow. And so Steve Killalea was pointing out that we're really in the beginning of really understanding peace. And with that said, the Summer of Peace is it's an inspired vision that's going to help expand that range of peace from the inner to the international and environmental. And for me, this is not an intellectual subject. This is not a theory. To me, this is deep and real. And I want to speak just briefly about some of my own experience of this for the purpose of dropping into the heart, because this is about the heart. It's also about the soul. And it's also from these experiences, I will take the liberty of looking at some of the spiritual, metaphysical underpinnings of what I see as driving the Summer of Peace. So as some of you who were here the last time I spoke know that one of my major initiations came from living 4 years in the bush in Sierra Leone, West Africa, in small remote bush villages with no electricity, no running water. The people just opened their hearts and their homes, and they brought me into a world that I never imagined possible from rural Indiana. And that was really my spiritual awakening, because there was such a deep sense of connection, family, community, nature, cycles of crops. So when I came back to the United States, the pursuit of happiness made no sense whatsoever. People seemed less connected with themselves, family, community, and nature than my friends who lived on less than $1 a day in sub-Saharan Africa. And then meanwhile, this hunger, this inner hunger, was driving a consumerism machine with media saying, you must have this in order to be happy, and you must have this to avoid fear, terrible things happening. And I knew that way of inner being was driving a consumerism that was impacting people in Sierra Leone. And that started my spiritual pursuit. Met Mickey Singer, the author of The Untethered Soul, and he kind of started, and then one step led another, and then before I know it, I'm a Yogananda devotee in Kriya Yoga. But that all intensified when Sierra Leone went into a bloody, chaotic civil war. And the villages I lived in were sacked by child soldiers. One village was sacked by a unit headed by a teenage boy named Colonel Rambo, who was trained in part by watching Rambo movies. AK-47s, rocket-propelled grenades coming from Ukraine, other countries around the world. Blood diamonds, paying for it. How many people saw the movie Blood Diamond? Unfortunately, it's very accurate, and my friends lived through that. Timber from Liberia being hardwood being cut by Charles Taylor, sold to China so we could buy it. So you could see the inner unrest of the Western world and consumerism was having an international impact, affecting people that I knew and loved. I mean, some friends were killed, some friends were raped, other children were taken to child soldiers. So inner affects the international. Inner unrest affects international chaos. Inner peace is a global responsibility. So for me, that dove me deeper into meditation, and then I had the privilege of going to work with Searcher Karma, going back to Sierra Leone, other parts of sub-Saharan Africa, and then later up to Nepal and over into the Macedonia Balkans. And that was really kind of like an awakening, because in the midst of that difficult situation, I was meeting incredibly inspiring people who in difficult situations could rise up with the human spirit. And then meanwhile, I'm going in and out of these conflict zones while meditating, and I'm throwing myself at the feet of the Divine Mother saying, what the heck is going on here? 8-year-old boys carrying AK-47s. And then these mystical experiences start happening of divine love. And I'm like, how do I hold divine love, an 8-year-old boy with an AK-47 together? So I kept diving into it and meeting these peace builders across Africa. And through that process, some insights came into mind, which I believe shine a light onto what's happening with the Summer of Peace and the wave that is emerging around the world, the wave of peace. One of the first principles is that conflict is a completely natural part of the human experience. It sounds like the teachings here talk quite a bit about that. Sheldon was talking about how conflict is necessary for harmony. In the tradition of Kriya Yoga that I study, we look at it as like, okay, in order to have a cosmic show, you need the light and shadow. Yogananda talks about it's like a movie, lights projected up, there's a shadow, it's all dancing. And then there's the polarity, positive, negative, and this dynamic of motion and movement. The motion doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be conflict, but there is the potential of galaxies literally colliding together. And then meanwhile, there's natural laws that govern things. And with the human experience, what brings that into a realm of conflict is when we feel a sense of separation from source, from to the divine, whatever word works for you, the beloved. And with that sense of separation, Tara Brach, who wrote Radical Acceptance, says what that can do is create fear. And when there's fear, then it develops the wanting self. I want to be happy, I want to avoid suffering. And every one of us here, my friends in the villages in Sierra Leone, people around the world, all of us have this operating system. So what do? We go out looking, try to rearrange a world that's constantly changing, governed by natural laws such as cause and effect, laws of karma, law of impermanence, trying to rearrange this world to get it the way we want it. And then we have the media saying we need this. And it's eventually we're going to bump into each other, and there's going to be conflict. And then it's just a matter of how we deal with it. Now, with that said, what I also discovered was peace is actually the essence of who we are. In meditation, the yogis that I've studied with have talked about one of the first signs of starting to contact the individual superconsciousness or soul is a negative peace, a lack of stimulation, which then opens up to a positive peace, which then opens up to joy, bliss, ecstasy, and experiences of divine love. And that's tapping into universal consciousness. I know the language is all different languages, cosmic consciousness, but you can go into states of non-duality. And that super consciousness is what's manifesting through us. And that peace exists deep in our hearts and souls and through all of us and is permeating everything. And that's a key principle. And peace is one of the most powerful forces, peace and love, because it's connected with that larger cosmic consciousness. And there's more peace going on in the world than there is, violent conflict. It's something that we overlook. I mean, every time you come to a stop sign and there's someone else, you agree to non-violently, go through the stop signs together. Now, another part is that I learned was it's how we deal with conflict that determines if whether or not it's going to go into complete, utter destruction or something in between to some kind of transformation. And there's patterns to this. And again, you may have heard me mention this in the last presentation, but again, fear is a driving force that pushes us into conflict becoming destructive. When there's fear, what we do is we start to narrow our identity. Even though we're all connected, from the same universal consciousness, we can narrow our identities down to, I'm a Democrat and you're a Republican. I'm a Hutu, you're a Tutsi. And it keeps going from there. And then there's a pattern. It's kind of like a rainbow where you start to stereotype the other. It's kind of fun. Who makes fun of a political figure here, huh? And enjoys it, right? It's a slippery slope, though. And then it goes down to demonizing the other, dehumanizing. And once you do dehumanize, then you can attack. So that's a pattern that happens. Now, there's also a reverse flow that happens. Is when you start to rehumanize the other. You start to see the humanity in the other. You start to put yourself in the shoe of the other. What happens is it opens innate qualities of compassion, tolerance, forgiveness, and love, which exist inside of all of us. And it starts to open up this peace. Taking this to another level is that another concept is thoughts are universally instead of individually based. And this is a yogi from the Yogananda tradition. One of the monks is talking about this. And if you take this and you apply it with these patterns of dealing with conflict, together with Dean Radin's ideas of entangled minds, then this is what happens, is wherever you place your focus, that's where your energy goes, and that becomes your consciousness. So if I focus on NFL football draft right now, that becomes my consciousness, and I have been following it. Yeah, I mean, the Colts, anyway. And so that becomes the consciousness. And in a meditation practice, like in a deeply bhakti practice, you awaken the heart, you awaken the compassion, you take that energy, and you just throw it up the spine into the spiritual eye, and you demand, Mother, reveal yourself. And you start to tune in with that frequency. And that opens up that frequency. And so thoughts, when your consciousness focuses on a frequency, you're vibrating at that rate, and you tune in with the universal aspect of that rate. And then that rate allows itself to flow through you more, and then also you can tap into the assistance according to that frequency. One of my favorite meditations at Christmas time, there'll be 100+ yogis in a room meditating on Christ consciousness. So there's the devas, there's the saints, there's the holy ones. This technology goes all different ways, though. NFL football, it also goes, we've seen it in Rwanda. when people tapped into a frequency of fear, they unleashed that cosmic potential on Earth. The science of creating a child soldier is the exact opposite of a Kriya yogi. Yama, niyama, you throw it out. Psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, shatter a young person, place them on drugs so they open up psychically, have them watch horrible movies, and have them commit atrocities. And then they're wedded to the people, the perpetrators. They're tapping into, I mean, it took me a while to try to figure out how an 8-year-old boy, and I won't go too far down this because I don't want to present it too much, but the children become the channels for that. And let's leave that at that point there, because I want to focus more on the positive potential of this, is that same technology is being used to transform entire societies, to awaken the capacity to open up and become channels for compassion, tolerance, forgiveness, and love. And in the last presentation I gave here, we talked a lot about Search for Common Ground's work, and how with that work, like in the classic example is Burundi next to Rwanda. Within a year of the genocide in Rwanda, Hutu Tutsi journalists co-producing radio programs that are going out on the airwaves. One woman had lost 79 members of her family to ethnic violence, and yet she was standing side by side with someone from the other ethnic group to co-produce those radio programs. They were helping Hutus and Tutsis rehumanize each other. Just as the heart map technology works to awaken the heart, this was a societal way of awakening the heart, which then awakens the potential for Burundi to open up to these other aspects. And spirit, and I like to think when you open up to this frequency, it's really opening up to the spirit of peace. And there's a peace builder named Louise Diamond in the Peace Ambassador training course that James O'D leads. So she organizes these conferences around whole systems changes. And she's had U.S. State Department, Defense Department coming into these meetings. And someone asked her, she said, well, how is it that you learned how to do this? And she literally said, I tune in with the spirit of peace. It's a consciousness, it's an entity. And this consciousness and entity is manifesting around the world in huge waves. Real briefly, one of my favorite heroes is a young boy in West Africa, Liberia, Kimmy Weeks, who we interviewed during Youth Rising for Peace. And Kimmy Weeks, when he was 9, he and his mother ran to a refugee camp. And he got really sick. And one day people came to the hut, and the mother wasn't there. They thought he was dead, so they threw his body onto a heap with others. And the mother came back. She's like, he's not dead, he's not dead. And she refused. She went and found him. And Kimmy said he was too weak to move, but he could open his eyes. He could see his mother's face and the love coming out of her and the concern. And at that moment, he made a commitment to God to dedicate his life to helping children avoid this situation. So you think about that. There's that love of the mother. The heart's open. That spark of the spirit of peace comes in. This boy is on fire. He gets better. He cleans up the refugee camp. He goes into Monrovia. He ends up creating a radio program that's been replicated in 20 countries around the world. This is happening everywhere. The spirit of peace is manifesting. It's manifesting through all of us here. It's manifesting through people around the world. It's creating a wave. And this is not a new wave. This is a wave that's been building over time. It's probably been a wave that's been there forever. And if you follow the yugas, it probably comes and goes. So this wave is manifesting. And it's manifesting in a way where it's going to become stronger, quicker. And there's a metaphor. There's a metaphor that I learned from one of the monks. And he has said that, the meditation practice is like planting a bamboo seed. You plant the Chinese bamboo seed and then you water it. First year, faithfully you water it, nothing happens. It's like, okay. So you water it the second year, faithfully you water it, nothing happens. Third year, you water it, same thing, nothing happens. Fourth year, you water the bamboo seed and still nothing happens. And then on the 5th year, within 6 weeks, the bamboo tree grows 90 feet. That's where we are in 2012 right now. there has been a powerful root system of peace builders emerging around the world in a continuum from inner to international. And it's the spirit of peace manifesting. Think about it. The Dalai Lama is kicked out of Tibet. So what happens? Tibetan Buddhism spreads around the world. Olivia and others help organize a world peace event in Washington, D.C. Vietnam War, Thich Nhat Hanh has to leave. What happens? Thich Nhat Hanh and Vipassana meditation spreading also. Vivekananda came to the U.S. in 1890s. Yogananda, 1920. There's Kriya yogis all around the world. Brahma Kumaris are in over 120 some countries around the world. TM meditators. The traditions that are represented here, Alice Bailey's traditions, are spreading around the world. And particularly in the last 30 years, it's been growing exponentially. Mirabai Bush, who did a study of contemplative practices, found out that there are more lawyers practicing yoga today than golf as a form of stress reduction. Yeah. Yeah, it's a tipping point. And how many lawyers does it take? Okay, anyway. So that inner peace part, and so the inner dimension is growing exponentially. HeartMath's work is growing exponentially. And then we look at from the interpersonal. How many people have heard of nonviolence communication? How many people have done the training? So that's growing around the world. Peer mediation. I've heard there's up to 90% of the high schools in North America, or at least the United States, have peer mediation programs. Community mediation. How many people have been, heard about community mediation centers in their towns or communities? These are growing exponentially. There's also the number of colleges and universities in the world today that have peace and conflict resolution has grown. In 1984, there was a handful. Today, there's hundreds around the world. There's national organizations working on all different type of issues. There's even who are successful at bringing Democrats, Republicans together, even though they don't get the airtime. International, think about it. Charles Taylor was brought to justice and was, convicted for the war crimes that he was behind in Sierra Leone. There's been a lot of positive emerging, quite a bit. The environmental work, Jane Goodall is a real champion to point out peace and environment are directly related. Lynn Twist with the symposium, Changing the Dreamer. Anybody's taken those symposiums? Okay. So there's quite a bit emerging. So how does the Summer of Peace fit into all this? Again, this wave has been happening. International Day of Peace has been around since 1982, 83. The Summer of Peace is deeply inspired. Stephen Dinan, the founder of the Shift Network, created the Shift Network out of a vision where he saw basically 3 days of meditation, setting up a multimedia network around the world that would facilitate the democratization of consciousness-raising content, to make it available. And part of that was the Summer of Peace. And the intention is to accelerate the shift from a culture of violence to a culture of peace. And also the intention is to have the largest celebration and call to action of peace building in one season in the history of humanity. Okay, it's big, it's bold, all right? It's either big or go home. So anyway, we're going big on this one. And the Summer of Peace, and for my friends from the Southern Hemisphere, is part of 4 cycles. So that's why we're calling it Summer of Peace. There's Winter of Wellness, Spring of Sustainability, Summer of Peace, and then Autumn of Abundance, and then Birth 2012. And the Summer of Peace, we're really seeing it, and we're partnering with a number of groups, and Push for Peace being a coalition of over 50 organizations, and the UN International Department or International Day of Peace group. And we're really viewing it as more of a meme. It's bigger than the Shift Network. The idea is that this wave has been emerging, and we're going to acknowledge it, we're going to celebrate it, and we're going to accelerate it. And by doing that, ideally, this meme will spread around the world. And I think it was Debbie was saying earlier today that when an idea comes in from spirit, whoever tunes into that frequency can run with it. There's already other groups doing Summer of Peace, and we're thrilled. There's a group in Woodstock, Live Peace International, which has 40 peace events lined up for the Summer of Peace 2012 Woodstock. There's another group in Africa that's creating weather peace, summer of peace. I got a call from Westerly, a man in Westerly, Rhode Island, said, I want to do summer of peace. I'm like, go for it. And, so there's a website, Westerly Summer of Peace. There's a woman, one of our peace ambassadors, Tyra St. John, who has Lake County. She's organized an entire county to do 100 events for the Summer of Peace. And a part of this building up for the Summer of Peace has been James O'Dee's Peace Ambassador Training Program. And Claire, raise your hand. Where are you? Hi, Claire. Claire took this program, and there's been over 500 trained. And there's also been people trained by Barbara Marx Hubbard, Agents of Conscious Evolution. So there's this group of, this cadre of people who can participate, and anyone can participate. So it's a meme that's emerging. And so how are we going to help facilitate this? How are we going to get this moving? And again, a part of it is the acknowledging and celebrating. Such as Sheldon and Helena were talking about, the mind in milliseconds can focus on the negative, but it takes 11 seconds to focus on the positive. Well, we're going to give it 3 months. Okay? We're going to focus 3 months on the positive that's emerging around the world. First of all, we're going to have live event that's streamed. We're only going to do a few events, and kind of like this one, by streaming it, it reaches out around the world. The mayor's office in Oakland is participating with us to hold a concert in Oakland on June 22nd. Meanwhile, in Rio 20, Ambassador Chowdhury from the United Nations and a bunch of young people are going to live stream in a message to Oakland. And this will all be live streamed. Everyone here, everyone live streaming now can participate and watch. And I think the bands right now, Morya Maldau and the Family Sly, and there's a few others who have confirmed. And so it's going to be a celebration, because the interesting thing about peace is when it starts to emerge, even in the most difficult situations, there's joy. Kimmy Weeks is one of the most joyous people I've ever met. You would never know what he's gone through. Because when that spirit of peace takes over the heart, there's nothing else you can do but be joyful. And so music is a big part of it. And it's going to be a celebration. And then we're going to have a conference in Oakland, a one-day conference. It's going to be a fractal of all the different ways that peace is emerging around the world. And then from there, what we're going to do is have Peace Day TV, which is a wonderful nonprofit organization that's connected with the United Nations TV. It's going to be rebranded as Summer of Peace TV. And it's going to be showing videos throughout the summer, peace-related videos. And it'll be live streaming events of other organizations doing things, like the Woodstock Group. It will live stream their events. We have criteria. It's basically nonviolence criteria. Winnipeg, there's 48 Rotary clubs that are putting together a concert on International Day of Peace. The city of Victoria is doing a celebration. Ottawa has 30 organizations coming together to create a festival. In Germany, there's 6,000 people coming together for a festival. This is a wave that is manifesting. It's going to grow 90 feet in 6 weeks. And all of us can be part of it. We are part of it. Every time you're kind to someone, you're part of this wave of peace. And by inspiring people, and I'll tell you about the Telesummit in a second, there's going to be resources. So you get inspired and you want to find out more. I'm going to find out more about nonviolent communication, so I can do that. Or I'm going to find out more about meditation, so I can do that. Or I'm going to find out more about education, so I can do that. We'll point you to the Cultural Peace Initiative website, so you can learn more about resources. And then the themes. And let me do the call to actions, and then I'll talk about the themes. The call to action is, and we've been back and forth on what this pledge will be, and Push for Peace, which is this coalition. We're going to do this together. And it's going to be, and they've got 50 organizations ready to go viral with this. And it's going to be announced by the Secretary General of the United Nations on June 13th is, take the pledge. How many acts of peace will you commit to doing in 2012? And our tech team right now is creating the infrastructure where you can enter in how many acts of peace you're going to do. And you can sign up for a weekly update to find out who is doing what around the world and how many acts of peace. And it's going to be connected with Facebook, where then you can tell your friends, I took the vow, and the number right now is up to 1,500,000 or whatever. And these young people want this to go viral. I mean, every day there's over 1 billion acts of peace happening. What we want to do is quantify it and then accelerate it. And then we're also going to have a YouTube channel where people can submit the YouTubes about peace. Anybody see where there's a man in Israel I'm sorry, this one gets me. They sneaks up on me. A man from Israel puts a video on saying, I love you, Iran. And the power of social media today, we can all be peace builders. Every one of us. He got responses back from Iranians. We don't have to wait for governments on this. It's our time. It's 2012. It's showtime. Also, you can share the events that you're doing. There's a map that you can, the technology will be there in the next week where you can enter the events and you can see on the map and who's doing what, and then you can go and participate. You can create your own. You can participate in circles. We have Birth 2012 circles. You can go and participate in circles and meet others. The virtual is great, but there's something about the power of coming together in person, people resonating around something. Now, and then also there's going to be a global coherence component. And the global coherence component is building upon the work of HeartMath together with David Nichol with the Gaia Field Project. And David Nichol has done his PhD study around subtle activism, the power of prayer and meditation to influence events. And so during the summer, we're going to have a telesummit, and I'll tell you the themes in a minute. And every Sunday, there's going to be a meditation healing time. Thomas Hubel from Germany is going to lead 3 of the sessions, and he's going to focus on healing specific conflict areas. The Goya Peace Foundation from Japan is going to do the World Prayer for Peace prayers on one of the Sundays. They've been doing that for years, talking about the light coming out of painful places. That's as a result of World War II in Hiroshima. So they're going to do it. We're going to have a couple that are going to be focused on subtle activism with the Gaia Field Project. And then we're going to have someone from the Native American community, the Buddhist, the Hindu, the Muslim, Christian, and Jewish each lead one. And that's an important part because what we are doing is inviting in the lineages. It's not just the speaker, it's the lineage they're tuned in with. Inviting them to come in and presence themselves. And then people who log in can go to the global coherence room that HeartMath has created with the globe and see the points of light of the other people around the world at the same time who are participating in the meditation. And that's going to lead to a culminating event on the International Day of Peace with thousands of people around the world all meditating for peace. So let me talk about these themes. The themes we've given a lot of thought to. If you go to the Birth 2012 site, you'll see Barbara Barks Hubbard's Wheel of Co-Creation. It's basically the fact that spirit is manifesting out through all these different pathways in society, and that there's a way of co-creating by bringing them all together. And then we've also been looking from the inner to the international. So for the first week, we're going to have an opening festival and then looking at inner peace also, because that inner part is really the foundation. The next week, then, we go into, and on Fridays will be a young person, under 35. And I will not be interviewing them. Anyway, I know I look young. But the second week is going to be forgiveness, and Azim Khamisa is kicking that one off. And for those who've heard Azim Khamisa's story, I mean, talking about the embodiment of peace, that man is really, yeah, he's profound. And on that Friday of Forgiveness Week, we're going to have Nonviolent Friday. The Nonviolent Friday, what that is we're having Michael Nagler, who's been a nonviolent specialist for over 40 years, designing 3 sessions that goes from the inner, because he's like, nonviolence is much more sophisticated than people realize. You really got to anchor yourself internally. The second part is constructive projects in the world, because Gandhi didn't go straight to nonviolent protest. He did the Salt March, constructive ways for people to get engaged to oppose the oppressing systems. And then the third is the nonviolent action. Then we move to communicating peace. Greg Kramer, who with Insight Dialogue, we're going to have invite someone from nonviolent communication, also someone from the media. Next week is education, and there's so much going on with education. The next week will be science, the science of peace. And again, what we've heard from HeartMath and Sheldon and Helena, the Institute of Noetic Science is going to be the host for that week, with Cassie Veaton interviewing scientists, looking at the hardcore scientific data that looks at compassion, looks at the power of love and forgiveness. And that's an important voice in this, because one of the things with the Summer of Peace is to move away, and James likes to say this is not your parents' protest movement. This is a wave of peace manifesting through all these different sectors of society. Then we'll move to justice, such as restorative justice, and we've got some people confirmed from Sierra Leone who are just doing amazing work. Imagine living in a small village where the perpetrators come back to live with you, or you're a perpetrator going back to the village that you did atrocities in. And the international court wasn't going to help people heal on that level. There are people who have designed a system of working within the cultural means of Sierra Leone to go back to those communities in a sacred way that brings healing on a village level from village to village. So we're interviewing those people. And we're going to be promoting their film beforehand. And that one, it's very powerful. It's very, very powerful. And the courage these people are showing, it's a courage that we can all model in our own lives. You know, anybody we have, you know, whenever I think about conflicts I have in my life, I think, if they can do that, I can work on healing my own conflicts. Then we move to urban peace, and this one's really fun because we have Pete Carroll, the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks, being interviewed for urban peace. Because Pete Carroll, when he was the head coach of the USC, he teamed up with Lou Tice, who recently passed away, and they said, we got to do something because the highest murder rate is close to campus. I can't allow this to happen in my community. And they created a project called Better LA. Professional football players are involved now in Better Seattle. I tell you, this peace wave is huge. And by framing it so we can all see it and acknowledge it, we'll be like, oh my God, it is really time. Healing cultural wounds. We're going to have a friend of mine, China Gallen, teamed up with African-American leader looking at healing Native or African-American healing here. James and I have been in dialogue but looking at how we can bring an attention to the fact of the genocide that happened in the Americas that's never been healed. You know, for us to really make quantum leap, there's got to be some pretty substantial healing on cultural levels. You know, not only indigenous peoples around the world, as well as, you know, the African Americans and elsewhere. And these are not easy subjects, and there's been a lot of incredible thinking. James is a leader in this area. Judith Thompson is a leader in this area. And then we're going to have a week on arts and culture. And this is fun. Jack Cornfield's confirmed for this one because we couldn't schedule him for the other one. He's like, well, the inner is the outer expression, and dances with the, you know, and he's organizing a large silent peace march in New York City. We have Velko Ripper confirmed as one of the filmmakers. We're reaching out to other musicians also. And again, think about that spirit of peace. When a person embodies it, it expresses through him or her or us in a way that's unique. And again, joy and music is a big part of it. I've seen this all across Africa. In Burundi, there's a festival where Hutus and Tutsis co-produce a huge festival, and that music opens the heart. We heard Debbie speak. When the heart's open, then there's compassion, tolerance, forgiveness, and love. And all of that can move through. We're also going to look at business and economics. And then we're going to have the week of 9/11 is military week. And this is a big one for shifting the paradigm. The person who's organizing this week was a conscientious objector in Vietnam War. He's a professor, best-selling author of academic books. And he's the first one to say some of the most forward thinking around human security, climate change, and peace building is coming from the military. And one of the people who's asked to speak is a retired captain from the U.S. Navy, and he asked to speak on 9/11 because he wants to speak about what's happened to military spending since 9/11. This is a man who has deep honor, loyalty, and courage. And he says the spending's out of control right now. At the same time, then, what we're going to do is that's going to lead into a 2-day event at the U.S. Institute of Peace, organized by the Alliance for Peacebuilding, which is a coalition of 70 organizations, and they're going to bring together some of the top minds in the military world for a working dialogue around peace in the military, and we'll live stream some of that. We're shifting paradigms at this time. The last theme then goes into politics, governance, and international relations. So these themes, and with the youth and then the Sunday spirituality session, we're going to be able to model and highlight and demonstrate how this bamboo is manifesting around the world. Now, if that wasn't enough, we're going to have the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. We have the largest room there reserved. We're going to be doing live feeds from the National Press Club in Washington about International Day of Peace events happening around the world. We will report back what's happened during the Summer of Peace. And we're partnered with Push for Peace. And I'm going to acknowledge Avon Madison right now for the International Day of Peace because, 82, Avon Madison's just been a champion for this wave that's been building all these years. And if that wasn't enough, at that point we partner with Push for Peace, and we're going to share the same website, Facebook, same YouTube, so we're channeling as many people with the pledges. They then start 90 days on top of the Summer of Peace of 90 days for a Push for Peace, encouraging people to take the pledge. And so these 50-plus organizations around the world are going to be driving people to look at what is their commitment to peace. And so Push for Summer of Peace, Push for Peace. And there's other groups also. There's Peace One Day in the UK on the International Day of Peace. Is going to have a concert with Elton John. And they're calling for a one-day ceasefire around the world. And so all these different expressions are happening. And the thing is, these expressions, again, go from the inner to the international. And each of us can choose to take a stand where we are. It could be as simple as, I'm going to go home from work in a good mood tonight. It can be, I'm going to do the dishes because this person's tired. It can be as simple as that. And in the workshop I'll lead, I'll give some other real simple techniques. Hello, love is one of my favorite techniques I learned from Heidi. It's like when you meet someone, just internally or verbally say, hello, love. It shifts the dynamics. So Push for Peace. Now, what's really fun about all of this, so the Shift Network has this Birth 2012 idea. So we did, anyway, there's always humor in this. And I'm known to be a peace pundit, so you have to excuse me on this one. We had Conception Day, right? and then we're going to have the Summer of Peace, and then it's going to lead to the big push, which then leads to Birth 2012. And Birth 2012 is a celebration, and in a second here, I'll get the website up. It's a huge celebration. It's really saying it's showtime. It's collectively, it's time for all of us to answer the call. It's a time for us to go deeper inward and listen and to really surrender ourselves fully to what wants to express itself through us in our own unique ways. And then together, co-create the world. As things fall apart, which they are, and there's reasons for that because they can't hold the new consciousness that's coming in, there's going to be a lot of fear. I go through it. I call it Kali barbecue when I go through it. I love her dearly. And so this is why we're bringing a focus to what's emerging. And so that together we can co-create. So Birth 2012, there's going to be a global celebration, December 22nd, which happens to be Barbara Marx Hubbard's birthday. That's a pretty specific incarnation request. So so all of this is going to culminate into Birth 2012. And granted, there may be some afterbirth, and we've got to take care of the little baby afterwards. Sorry, mothers. But it's going to be a celebration and a global celebration. And we know there's going to be work then in 2013. There's going to be a lot more. But what we will have done is raise awareness through the Winter of Wellness, the Spring of Sustainability, the Summer of Peace, the Autumn of Abundance, Push for Peace, Peace One Day, International Day of Peace. All of this is going to raise awareness of all the different ways that each of us can be embodying the change that we want to see in the world, how we can take it on. And in a second, I'll ask someone to help me with the technology here, and I'll put up on the screen. See if I can do this here quickly. Good, it's on that page instead of NFL draft. So here's the birth 2012. They're in like the 6th round right now, going into the 7th round of the draft. And you can see on the map, you can see the people around the world. Here, spring sustainability. Summer of peace. And on the map is really fun. Then you can look on who's doing what where. You can see if there's things you want to participate in. Then you can also say, hey, I want to create something. It could be as simple as a small meditation group, which is powerful if you really meditate deeply. And then Barbara Marks Hubbard, who's the matron of it all. And we're going to be merging James's classes, Peace Ambassadors, together with hers into this whole celebration. So that, my friends, that's a brief summary of going from inner to international, the wave that we are all part of. And I want to thank you for your own individual expressions. The vibration in this room is wonderful. And clearly this group and the people internationally are contributing quite a bit through subtle activism and are contributing. And please continue to contribute. And if you're inspired, please join us with the Summer of Peace, Birth 2012. All right, thank you. There's 1 minute and 27 seconds, so if anybody has a quick question.
Yeah.
Just a quick, 100 million people are going to join this, Philip?
Yeah, you know, one thing I love about Stephen Dinan is thinking really big. And that's the vision, is 100 million people. I mean, just thinking about the number of people who are going to participate in the International Day of Peace is going to be more than 100 million people around the world. It's quantifying it and measuring it and counting is another thing. And hopefully we'll be able to do that. But already what's lined up for International Day of Peace will reach over 100 million people. Yeah. Questions? Yeah.
One more, yeah.
I want to express my deep gratitude for what you're doing. And we all remember that besides all others, this 2012 is significant with the festival week of the new group of world servers, which exactly going to occur on December 21st to 28th.
Nice.
And DK says that whenever the festival week, which happens every 7 years, it's the 7-year cycle, coincides with the full moon. It's a special time of opportunity for the groups around the world to precipitate the vision for the next cycle and to work with the energy of the will, transforming it through love and emanating it to humanity, to all the people of goodwill. And so it's definitely a moment of opportunity for not only for the esoteric groups working with the will energy, but for all the groups, for all the new group of world servers working together in synchronicity.
Right, absolutely agree. And the meme is bigger than any one organization or any coalition organizations. Thank you for pointing that out. Yeah.
Thank you, Philip.
Yes, welcome.
Yay.